And one of the things that we've been covering for this chapter is these areas, these regions of the brain. And one of the things that we've learned, all right, so we've got that primitive region, which is the brain stem. We've got the cerebellum, which is still not quite as primitive, but still primitive. And a lot of the things that it deals with is for our motor coordination, for our, skeletal muscles and so forth. And then we have this really huge, large portion, the cerebrum, which is what we tend to think of when we think about the brain. But what we're finding, even though this is our area for higher order thinking, okay, it is accepting information for all these different senses, where we've got like our general sense of touch, but we've got still, we still got to deal with sight, smell, sound, taste, equilibrium. And yes, one of the things that we've looked at is some of these gyri are very prominent. And at this point in time, we left off at this area where we have a central sulcus, meaning we've got this line, this indentation, that even on the left and the right, for both, it's a very prominent line marking or something that we can really see. And so we have what's called our pre-central gyrus and a post-central gyrus. And then we've got a little bit of area in front of each one that are termed our association areas. They're dealing, these little gyri, pre and post, they're dealing with a certain type of information. So we've got to have our sensory information come in. And then we've got to have our response, or the motor information, to go out. So one of these gyri is our sensory, one is motor, and then of course it's on both sides. We've got the little association areas. So as we're looking at this and thinking about, well, what is this going to do? Since this is the region that deals with higher order thinking skills, that means this is going to work with activities we plan, that we are going to purposely be aware of, like taking the notes, walking somewhere, all right? So it's dealing with activities we are purposely doing because it's our higher order making those decisions. So as we look at this area that we left off at, we did mention that decussation occurs, meaning anything from the right will be processed by the left, anything from the left will be processed by the right, okay? And one of the things that we do to kind of represent, because if we're looking at our sensory information, because that's the one that we left off at, we get a representation of that based upon what they call the homunculus. What it was showing is that area of the cortex that is in proportion to the body part picking up the information. So homunculus is telling us that this sensory information, a lot of our cortex of this area of the brain is given to dealing with sensory information from the facial area, where we've got eye, nose, face, upper lip, teeth, gums, lower lip, tongue. We've got a lot of it dealing with our hands. A little bit for the arm, elbow, and so forth. A little bit for the trunk of the body. A little bit for the thigh and legs. A little bit for the toes. A little bit for the genitalia. This is a decent amount for viscera. So that means this is dealing with, or this is how much we're allowing for that cortex to deal with sensory information. Information that needs to come in. Once that information comes in, it has to be relayed to the areas of the brain to process it. So we have to make sure that it gets sent to the cortex, the area that can process it, and then give us a response back. So what we're going to see is our motor control. Once again, because we are in this cerebrum, what we're doing is intentional. All right? It's voluntary what's taking place. So the intent to move muscles, like, okay, well, I'm going to pick up the paper, or I'm going to write with the pen, I'm going to turn the page of the book. All of that is intentional. But now, wait a minute. How is it that it all gets started? If it is intentional, how do we actually get this, whatever we're planning to do, whether that's walk, move the arm, whatever the case might be, how do we actually get it started? How? Now, if we're thinking about doing it intentionally, like writing on paper, throwing a frisbee, okay? How do we actually get that started? Well, although sight will be important, okay? What we've really done, if this is based upon intent, this means you have thought about it. Do what? In the frontal lobe of the brain, the frontal lobe is where we're going to begin to determine what we're going to do. So as I purposely walk around the classroom, as I move my hands, okay, because I can't talk without my hands moving, okay? So as I do this, this is with intent, and it's because I'm thinking about it. The thinking about it can actually begin the transmission of the impulse, the synapses firing. because it's intentional. So, in the frontal lobes, where we're going to find the association area for the motor commands, we're going to create a program that will get transmitted to that precentral gyrus. We're going to send those signals to the brainstem and the spinal cord, and our result is the muscle contraction. So it's all voluntary. We are doing this on purpose. And the way that we get to do that is we're using higher order brain skills. The thinking, the planning, the putting it together. So once we transmit that information, now muscle control is contralateral from the precentral gyrus. Do you happen to remember what contralateral meant? On the same side. So that decussation for the motor waits a little while before it switches over. It actually reaches the cerebellum and the brainstem first before the decussation occurs. The decussation for the motor control doesn't take place in the hemispheres, in the cerebrum. So, other areas that we're going to find in our cerebrum, because once again, this is all looking at intent, something that we're doing on purpose. Language. For us to be able to speak, it involves the ability for us to be able to read, write, have the ability to speak, understand sign language, understand words. Language is very complex. In some cultures, more complex than others, okay? Because if you look at like Mandarin, Chinese, and so forth, where the symbols are representative of letters, that's much more complex than what we see with our language. It's going to actually involve some areas of the brain, and we're going to be looking at an area called the Wernicke area and the Broca area. Ever heard of these? How?
They deal with.
Hold on, Nate.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
For us class,
Probably like a psych class maybe, or something
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, or soc or something. Okay, yeah, because they kind of look at these areas of the brain and how they're going to maybe affect a particular type of behavior. Nate, how have you heard of it?
Oh, same thing.
Like taking another class?
Yeah, psychology and biology.
Okay. Now, there's of course been a lot of study done with these areas of the brain because of what each area is going to do. Because one of the areas is going to actually help us to plan and put together the program, and then the other one's going to carry it out. In the Wernicke area, this is where we're going to recognize the spoken and written language. And that means across the cultures. Because, like I said, the different languages are going to have different alphabets and so forth. Now,